New Thought Media Network. We are a global broadcast network of positive music, media, and entertainment, inspiring humanity's evolution along the journey of enlightenment and creating a world of love, peace, empowerment, and prosperity for all. New Thought Media Network. Positively inspiring.
Hello again, dear ones. Reverend Robert with you over here.
Rev Z right here.
And I'm Reverend Jacquelyn Edwards. Hi.
Welcome, Reverend Jacquelyn. She is our special guest today, folks. As you know, Rev Z and I are here every Tuesday, and we like to bring in some of the most amazing people, amazing voices. And over the last couple months, we've been focusing in on the amazing people that have come together to create the Celebrating Our Soul conference. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. Let's do a proper introduction. Reverend Jacquelyn Edwards is an ordained Centers for Spiritual Living minister, currently serving as the Community and Civic Engagement Minister at the East Bay Church of Religious Science. She has previously served as a senior minister, a founding member, and past chair of the CSL Diversity and Inclusion Commission. She is an instructor at the CSL School of Spiritual Leadership and also currently serving as a member of the CSL Spiritually Motivated Social Engagement Committee. You have been busy within the organization for as long as I've ever known you. So it's good to see all these things put together in one place. Reverend Jacquelyn is also the founder of Platinum Butterfly Ministries, through which she envisions creating a world in which everyone has the opportunity to thrive. She believes that we are uniquely positioned to co-create healthy, inclusive, racially and socially diverse and economically prosperous communities that celebrate life. She has a bachelor's degree in human relations, a master's degree in organizational development, and in organizational development and change. She also has a master's degree in consciousness studies. She has over 20 years of experience in human resources management, is a teacher, public speaker, spiritual coach, and group facilitator. And her ministry emphasizes spirituality as a path to prosperity, justice, and peace. Girl, you got all the keywords in there. Because that is what we do, and that is absolutely what you do. When you sent that over and I read through that, I was like, yep. This is Jacquelyn right there. So very well done on your bio there. Thanks for sharing that with us. Welcome aboard. Say hello. Share. What did we miss? Share with the people a little bit more about who you are in the world.
Thank you. Who and how I am, and I'm really owning and stepping into, is I am a change agent. And in that way that I am also a born-again religious scientist, that change is constantly being with me. Right now, as you know, I am also part of the planning team for the Celebrating Our Soul conference that starts next week. I was just looking at my watch. This time next week, I will be at Unity Village, an experience that I'm really excited about because I've never been there. And I've been learning in the course of participating on the planning team as well as the volunteer team, how United, I'm going to use the initials so I don't mess up the name, UFBL, CSL, Centers for Spiritual Living, how our organizations kind of meld together at points, come back out. And it's so much more than the little clipped generalities. that we've used over the years. You know, I can remember saying to somebody, having someone saying to me, and then I repeat it, well, you know, the Unity people are a little bit more into Jesus than we are. They're a little bit more traditional than we are in New Thought. And that's kind of true and kind of not true. I've learned what I'm learning is that we are spokes on a wheel or fingers of a hand. And that while we may have different vocabulary words, remember in school when you had the vocabulary test every week, we may have different vocabulary words. We're talking about the same thing. And the kernel is this idea that God is all there is. Everybody's on board with that. God is all there is. There is nothing else. There's no entity that embodies evil, right? God is all there is, and that includes me. That allness includes me. It includes me. It includes all of us. So, from that central idea, that central core, we each bring a blossom. If I'm changing my metaphor now to a vase of flowers, right? So from that vase, we each bring a different blossom. We each bring a different way, which is awesome because that means that we get to speak in the languages of all the different people on the earth. That was maybe more than you asked for, but you did say a little something. That was my little something.
Well, you know, I love that because what popped into my mind is there is a central story, there's a central theme, which is God is all there is. And so then when we look at all of the various New Thought spokes, if you will, or fingers on the hand, everybody takes that core and tells a different story or uses a different metaphor for that to be anchored in their heart and spirit. So, you know, some people like adventures. Some people like drama. Some people like suspense. And so we have all these different ways of telling the story, but the punchline, if you will, the plot, the thing we're looking for at the end of the story is always the same.
Folks, we do experience a little technical difficulties now and again, but it looks like we've got Jacquelyn back with us. And you are muted, dear one. So you want to look for the mute button on your side, Jacquelyn.
Okay. Am I back?
You're back. Yes.
Back. All right.
So yeah, that's the key though. It's the same storyline told from different perspectives, whether it's a drama, whether it's an adventure, whether it's sci-fi, nonfiction, pick the genre, but the story is the same. And that's what these different fingers or spokes are of New Thought.
And we are celebrating that next week for 4 power-packed days. And I know you've had guests on talking about the content of the conference. I think what I would like to touch on, and I don't know, so feel free to say, yeah, we know that already. Because I want to take full advantage of the time. But the thing that got me there, in addition to an invitation that this thing is going on, these people are having this conversation about Black people in New Thought, is the way in which that literally touched my soul. Meaning that when I came to religious science, and I'm going to tell on myself a little bit, 40 years ago, and I don't believe it's that long myself. I go, what? No, I'm only 35. But anyway, when I came to religious science, one of the things that initially struck me, based on my growing up with the parents that I grew up with, who have a deep Southern root, my mom from Florida, Georgia, and my dad from Arkansas, growing up in a Baptist church, When I got to religious science, what struck me first and foremost, what came out of my mouth, in fact, with Reverend Dr. Ernie Forks, my first teacher, was this is an African religion.
Mm.
Now, I didn't have any hardcore evidence. I just knew what I had observed and what I had experienced in my growing up. One of our presenters, um, Reverend Dr., and he's actually coming, and this is important, as Baba Will Coleman. His workshop is going to take a deep dive into the African connection in New Thought.
Mm.
So I had that intuitive belief and feeling at the time. And over the years, and particularly during the last, I'm going to say 2 to 3 years, I've actually explored more of that perspective, if you will. And in that exploration, what I'm continually finding, and the reference point I like to send people to, is to go look up the 16 principles of Ifa. That's IFA, Ifa, an African religion that goes back 7,000 years. And when you look at those principles, it is amazing. Amazing. That thing we talked about earlier, there's only one God. It's the first principle of Ifa 7,000 years ago. So, how the journey happened, I don't know, and I don't think that's important. But what I do think is important, and what got me to participating in this work that is this conference, and what a big part of this conference is about, is making a statement about the African and or the Black presence within New Thought. In our early studies, to a very large extent, we talked about in that Masters of Consciousness studies that I have. We get Plato, we get Socrates, we get the classical philosophers, but nowhere in there do we explore African religions. We are in a time frame, not just in the United States, but on the entire planet, where it is no longer an option for truth to be told, but it is imperative for truth to be told in order for us to collectively move forward. In the Barbara Marx Hubbard, a person that I like to always call in because she talks about conscious evolution. And conscious evolution is both integral to this ideation that we call New Thought, as well as our marching orders. It's what we're being called upon to do. And in order to march forward, again, going to the African tradition, there is the Sankofa bird, which is the symbol of our conference. And the Sankofa symbolizes, it's a bird that's facing forward, but it's looking back, and it has an egg in its mouth. It is facing forward, but it's looking back, bringing in the wisdom and the knowledge that was garnered from the past. And the egg that it's holding, we know eggs are very fragile things, right? You have to hold that with love and care and tenderness. The egg represents the way and ways in which we caretake. We take care of what we have. How are we stewarding? And of course, that kind of weaves in the things that are going on with regard to the planet and climate change and all of that. But this idea of stewardship is integral to both our what can we learn from the past and how do we consciously co-create the way that we go forward into the future. Mm-hmm. And I see this conference as, and actually, Robert, you said it earlier, as being the first of the integration of the everybody, the everybody. In CSL, we talk about creating a world that works for all. This is an opportunity to put the word out in the world that these philosophies that we are building upon, these different organizational gatherings, have a root that is multi-ethnic. I'm going to say that. Yeah. And in that multi-ethnicity of it, it includes the African perspective, and in the building of it in a more contemporary sense, that there are all sorts of fabulous people of color, Black folks, that contributed to the growing in the contemporary, in the current age of what we call New Thought. So we know the big names. We know, everybody knows Reverend Dr. Michael Bernard Beckwith, who's going to be one of our keynote speakers. Right. Many of us particularly in CSL and in Colorado, know Reverend Elzia Sekou, who is also another one of our presenters. But there are some people who are going to be there who, if you are not a part of INTA or one of these organizations, that you may not be so familiar with, whose names you may not know. Sheila McKeithen comes to mind for me. There are going to be speakers and there are going to be workshop presenters. There we go with our workshop presenters. There are going to be speakers and presenters who the general public may not be aware of, or who people who have not necessarily written voluminous books, or people who may not have congregations of thousands of people. But they are people who have made a difference. Historically, we are going to be celebrating the people on whose shoulders we stand. And I want to, and I don't know if you can see this. This is a little book. It's called Gems of Wisdom from Black Leaders of New Thought. And it's free on the Unity website. If you go to Unity Worldwide Ministries, you can get this book. You can send for it and they'll send it to you. And in this little booklet, we have in the front some New Thought organizations listed. UFBL is Universal Foundation for Better Living, started by one of my sheroes, Reverend Dr. Johnny Coleman. And I laugh when I say her name because of just the richness of all she has contributed. And she has that line, it works if you work it, right? That's the Johnny Coleman classic. It works if you work it. You cannot take your textbook and sit it on the shelf and look at it.
Right.
This is a practice. This is practice that we're talking about.
And in many ways, this is, to me, like what you're speaking to. In many ways, New Thought is very much a chameleon.
Yes.
It takes on the flavor and the culture of the community that is already there. So for you, right, this was an African tradition from the minute you heard heard it. For me, that's very different. We all can, and when all the speakers we've spoken to in this program over the last couple of months have shared a similar story of finding what finally spoke to them in their own language. Unfortunately, it seems that sometimes New Thought communities then become insulated in that way. And this conference is so important because we're bringing all the various parts of the family tree, if you will, back together for a big old family reunion. And I just got to spend a week in Chicago in the house that Johnny built, and Christ Universal Temple. What an amazing property and an amazing community and an amazing group. And it reflects the consciousness of the leadership. This conference, when I look at it on paper, when I look at who's coming, when I look at the people involved, it's reflecting the consciousness of the team that's brought it all together, yourself included.
And you mentioned that statement by or the concept that Dr. Barbara Marx Hubbard used, that evolutionary process. Well, when we look at the evolution of consciousness, when we look at the evolution of anything, we always find the kernel of it. And so even when you were talking about we know a lot about, let's say, Greek philosophy. Well, the original Greek philosophers, and if we go all the way back to the father of what we call history, Herodotus, in this world, we know there were others, but the one that's noted, Herodotus himself said, consciousness, civilization started in Africa. If you pick up the Greek teachers, they will tell you, we studied in Egypt. That's why you have a lot of the Greek gods paraphrasing or modifying, if you will, names and concepts and ideas that were first presented in Egypt. And then if you really understand the history, Egypt came from Sudan. So it went upriver. It didn't start, it was an evolutionary process that brought us to a point. And if we understand evolution and genetics and that whole science of the oneness, we can't forget that, it's always expanding and intertwining. And so when we can accept that as life, then all these different idioms and ideologies, we can begin to say the kernel, the seed that populated all this is oneness. And when we can get back to that in its newfangled way, it's gonna be all right. As Kendrick Lamar say, it's gonna be all right.
Yes, it's gonna be all right. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed.
So I am excited about the conference. One, for all of the long lost cousins and second cousins and first cousin 3 times removed and here is a true story, right? Real quick. So as you guys know, I'm a amateur genealogist doing my genealogy research. Mm-hmm. And so I stumble up on someone on my ancestry tree named, and I'm looking at the name. I'm not going to give anybody's name away. But I'm looking and I've been trying to contact this person for a couple of years, and we've been hitting and missing. And so one day I'm looking and it said, try this search. So I tried to search. The person came up on, I don't know if it was LinkedIn or Facebook. And then I recognized, well, shucks, she know a whole bunch of people I know. So I called somebody I know. I said, do you know who this person is? I've been trying to connect. Lo and behold, that person that I called contacted this person. And here's the kicker. She's a minister, CSL minister. She's going to be in Kansas City. And when we're trying to figure it out, it's going to be, she says, well, because we did connect way back. She says, I think that your grandmother and my grandmother were either sisters or first cousin. And so we're going to meet in Kansas City next week to have a real big old family reunion on all fronts. And that's what inspires me about this conference, is that there'll be that kind of family connection and all kind of other family connections that we need if we're going to be effective and successful in a changing world that is sometimes unforgiving.
Yes. And my friend who's also going to be there, Reverend Dr. David Alexander, and I are fond of talking about whether or not this thing that we call New Thought is a spiritual process, a practice, whether or not these are tools that constitute it being a liberation theology. And liberation theology is huge if we're looking at the actually look that up and look at its Catholic roots and what that has meant. And again, the invitation is in asking the question, is New Thought a liberation theology? There's also the invitation to define what it is that we are talking about when we use that terminology, and how do we see using this work and this material to promote and to engage in social justice.
Yes.
Right.
The SMSE committee is that, along with, I would say, the diversity committee. Those are kind of the arms of that within CSL. But and I'm saying and there is still the pull, is we is or is we ain't. And I'm saying it like that purposefully.
Yeah.
Is that who we are intended to be? I looked at, and I'm extending an invitation to all you CSL folks out there and non-CSL folks too. One of the kernels of the teaching is Ernest Holmes's talk that he gave, Sermon by the Sea. And that talk is often used as the undergirdings of why we're not. Because he says in that talk, show me a person who is for something and against nothing. When I read that, I'm doing a happy dance, because one of the, and I know we don't use these kind of words, but I'm going to use it anyway. One of the problems with our creating equity and justice on the planet has been too much dwelling in what the problem is. It's been too much dwelling in what's not working, what's bad, wrong, and awful. So when we say for something and against nothing, that means I'm putting my attention on what I am for. I am for social justice. I am for equity. I am for inclusion. Now, in being for those things, going back to the Sankofa imagery, we have to also be aware of how we got here, but we don't live there. We don't live in the how we got there. We live in the where we are now and what is required of us to propel ourselves forward. So I would very much in earnest suggest, I was going to say argue, in fact, I am still going to say argue, that our New Thought philosophy not only supports, but encourages the work. It encourages us to be involved. It encourages us to engage with those that we might call the least among us. It encourages us to engage at the judicial level. When the Supreme Court, in all of the interesting activities they've been involved in of late, one of those was to decide that it's okay to use federal, state, and local education funding for religious schools.
Right.
Now, initially, as a real strong, adamant advocate of separation of church and state, I'm talking about myself now, I was a little bent out of shape when I heard that. And it was probably within a minute that I got, oh, wait, I can't wait to start the Ernest Holmes High School. Where are we going to have our elementary schools? Where are we going to set up our middle schools? How many of our communities have space or can locate space that could serve both as where we do our Sunday service and how we teach our children?
Well, you know, what's key there? What's key there, and something you said earlier when you were talking about liberation theology, and I had the honor and pleasure on several occasions to sit with Dr. James Cone, who coined, that was his coining thing when I lived in New York. And the thing about liberation theology is just that, right? It liberates. Now, not only the body, but the mind and the soul. And when we look at new thought, that's the intent. When we look at religious science, for sure, in my mind, the intent is, what is the science at all levels of existence that will liberate me from the everyday drudgery of life where I can't accomplish? I'm always seeming under the begun or whatever, so that we begin to think, as you were just explaining, in an evolutionary way of how do we take this teaching and move it forward. Now, like one of the things, my kids went to a Montessori school, and Maria Montessori's model fits almost, you could almost take that and do just a little bit of tweaking and drop it into a religious science community for a school system. And you just, take the reins off and let that thing run. And that's what we have to begin, because we know it's all teaching, it's all culturation. So we have to create an environment, a culture, and a method of exchanging knowledge and ideas that supports life, that supports innovation, that supports diversity, that supports inclusion. And that's what we're missing, because even in our regular school system, the competition, and we need healthy competition. I love that, but we can't have that as the sole driving force of how we create our existence. And when we can drop that and begin to look more inclusive and look in a liberation of liberating ourselves from these old ideas, these old systems, these old things that are keeping us stuck in place, now we're going to be moving with cooking and gas.
Yes.
I do believe it was actually on this program that Reverend Dr. David Alexander shared with us one day that this move towards, again, the great chameleon that is New Thought. Where it needs to be a liberation theology, it's a liberation theology. Where it needs to or wants to be a prosperity theology, it's a prosperity theology. As we've spoken about on this show, where it wants to be prophetic New Thought, there are chapters of the prophetic New Thought. And something you said earlier, Reverend D. Jacquelyn, this sense of my friends in Unity and UFBL and these other places that I didn't know about. It's like, oh, wow, they're thinking the same thing I'm thinking. Imagine that, right? We're coming to recognize that this philosophy has grown itself, has demonstrated itself in so many various aspects of life, exactly as it was necessary to get us all to where we are. And now it becomes really evident that we've been saying it for decades. We're the ones we've been waiting for, that together we all rise.
Yes.
I have to be able to embrace every aspect, everyone within this that is using, being influenced by this philosophy equally and with equity, that we're there. We're actually demonstrating this through this conference and other conferences. It is like the summer of oneness around the New Thought movement happening this year. Every conference I go to or I hear about, we're asking the same types of questions. How does New Thought remain relevant in the emerging future of human consciousness?
And of course, Robert, real quick, you brought me back to my you always do it. You brought me back to my mainstay of understanding all of this is the human body. We have the respiratory system, the circulatory system, the limbic system, the elimination system, the neural system. All these systems are great systems by themselves, but it's only when they are liberated to do their own thing that your body is going to exist. And when they get out of the oneness, when they get out of the interconnection, they call that disease, and then nobody want that. So the key is, how do I liberate every system in my body or in my life to be exactly what it is created to be, but understand without the other system, ain't none of us going to exist. So we need to resolve all the problems, all the crap that ain't important, and figure out how we work together to support the one. And when we do that at all levels of existence, you know, as they say in the church, Hosanna, Hosanna.
Yes.
Oh, folks, if you wonder what you've stumbled into, this is New Thought Today here on the New Thought Media Network. It happens every Tuesday at 2 p.m. And we are overdue to give a shout out to some of our sponsors and supporting organizations. So we're going to do that for just a minute. Let everybody here grab a quick drink of water and a quick stretch. We'll be back in just a minute with more New Thought Today and our special guest, Reverend D. Jacquelyn Edwards. Stay tuned. We'll be right back with you. Welcome back to New Thought Today. Rev Robert with you over here. My co-host, Reverend Elzia Sekou, and our special guest, Reverend D. Jacquelyn Edwards, is with us. D. Jacquelyn, before we get too far down the field, we're having a great conversation here, folks. If you're just joining us, just wait till this processes and you can hear the front half of this interview. Before we do get too far afield, I'd love to learn a little bit more about the Platinum Butterfly Ministries. And I love the imagery, and I want everybody that's watching to learn a little bit more about that as well. So help us understand that portion of your work, please.
So the nutshell of it is realizing that social justice work is really what I'm up to. It's really what I am about. Mm-hmm. And so Platinum Butterfly Ministries has that idea of social justice work at its core. And it is the opportunity for me to continue. We know that ministry is the process of growing in the public eye, which can sometimes be very interesting, I might add. So it's the opportunity for me to continue the growing in the public eye as I hone my skills of creating tools for us to move forward in this work. And that last line of my bio, I earnestly believe that we get to have the whole 9 yards. Mm. We get to be prosperous, we get to be healthy, we get to have fun, and we get to have equity and justice in the world. And I say it like that because I'm not going to talk about anybody else now. I'm going to talk about me, my own personal experience. When I came to this philosophy, much of what I was involved in could be called anything. In my life, I've gone the whole gamut from civil rights work to, okay, I'm a full out revolutionary now.
Mm.
What I have noticed and what really got very clear in my face when I started taking religious science classes is that when I put my focus, and it's interesting because I think it was you, actually both of you mentioned are we showing up as prosperity work, right? That when I did that work, that my money was flowing nicely, just really nicely, right? Growing. I have a daughter, and so, as parents, we know we put so much into having our children's needs met.
Right.
But out of the corner of my eye, I'm still seeing what I'm going to, as way of abbreviation, call the crazy going on out there in the world. But when I turn my attention to the crazy, and see, this goes back to for something and against nothing.
Right.
When I turn my attention to the crazy, then my money gets funny, right? I mean, literally, and it's almost like an overnight thing. And so having that experience in my life gave me the ability to understand what I'm seeing in the world when I'm seeing these people who are about having prosperous, love-filled, wholesome lives, saying, yeah, we're not about that. That thing over there, we're not about that. Because whether they have personally had the experience, they have personally witnessed, and we have a mythology in our culture without even going into as deeper dive as actual social justice work. We have a mythology in our culture, and I think this too is planetary, that says if you're in the helping fields, right, then that's not a place where you get to make money. That's a place where you should be happy and joyous and satisfied because you're doing good in the world.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
How much money does it?
Good in the world does not buy me a plane ticket to go to Jordan, to go to the Holy Lands, to see the pyramids in Egypt, to visit some of my people in Kenya.
Mm-hmm.
There has to be, if any part of this philosophy is true, there has to be a meeting of. There has to be a place where and this is my tagline, pollinating the spiritual nature, because I believe that we all have a spiritual core. By pollinating, seasoning, teaching the spiritual nature of individuals, groups, and organizations, we create a world in which everyone has the opportunity to thrive.
Yes.
Yes.
And I use that not because I didn't want to use creating a world that works for all. I've had this business for over 20 years. I'll just say that. No, I'll go ahead and tell the whole truth. I got my first business license in 1996.
Okay.
And what I understand growing up with the parents that I grew up with is that, we have that adage, you can take a horse to water, but you can't make them drink.
Mm-hmm.
And so what my goal is to have the opportunity to thrive. Now, if you choose to do the work, it's on you, but it won't be because there was no opportunity there for you. It won't be because education was not available. It won't be because the healthcare was not available or because housing was not available, right? So this ministry is about, I would say two primary areas, like the foundation being doing the social justice work, but the work itself that's on top of the foundation is understanding that part of the work includes prosperous living. It includes doing our spiritual work. In fact, the only way that we are going to be successful with whatever our goal is, creating a world that works for all, creating a world in which people have the opportunity to thrive, is if we do it from our spiritual core. It has to be. And so there's the invitation to expand that.
Yeah.
So private schools are having kids meditate now. Meditation has become a way of life in many sectors of our culture. And I think that's because of New Thought. I think New Thought has been an integral part in putting that out there. I think these tools that we have, understanding that there is that lives at the center and core of my being, that is both empowering and is greater than I am, and that I can communicate with. And in my communications with that greater than I am indeed a co-creator of my life experience. That those are just liberation theology.
Well, and see, the interesting piece for me on that is wholeness. When we look at any ancient, whether it's African, Amazonian,
Asian,
Mayan, any of the ancient traditions, they have this concept of wholeness. And I'm going back to the part where you were saying, if I do my prosperity, this goes. If I do that, then the prosperity. Because when we begin to look at life in wholeness, and my favorite metaphor is the body. Right now, my heart and lungs are just working, dry lung soap. If I start running, my body's gonna say, "Ooh, fool, you need some more oxygen. Are you about to pass out?" So my heart's gonna start pumping a little bit faster to start sending some more oxygen. And so it's like an on-demand system when we work in wholeness. If my heart refuses to start pumping faster when I'm running, my lungs at some point going to say, "All right, well, just pass out because I ain't got no oxygen." And so when we can begin to live life that way, when we live life in wholeness, and as they say, an on-demand system, when prosperity needs to pop in, prosperity pops up, does its thing. When social justice needs to pop up, and I don't need to not keep a thread in the prosperity pot and go whole hog into the social justice pot. It's an ebb and flow. It's an ebb and flow. And when we do that, we're living in wholeness. We're living in oneness. And we're living in the core teaching of religious science, of all ancient traditions, and New Thought as it has been reclaimed. It is a system where everything recognizes everything else and understands uniquely and distinctly that without you ain't no me. Without me ain't no you. So whatever's the problem, we need to fix it, because we all gonna be gone in a few minutes.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
I'm loving this, folks. I hope you are too. We've been sharing this quote by Holmes, right? Before something and against nothing. And I think that people in our philosophy, they like to take that to mean that, we've got to allow those things. And we also teach argumentative treatment that says when we see a condition that is not in alignment, we acknowledge that condition, we deny its power, and then affirm the truth.
Absolutely.
So being for something and against nothing doesn't mean that I say no. I say no to sexual trafficking. I say no to human trafficking. I say no to guns. I say no to the rampant drug problems that are out there today. But I don't spend my time sitting there going, no, 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 no.
Exactly.
Oh my God. We say no. Here's where we're.
Absolutely.
And here's what we're going to do.
Absolutely. And
New Thought today, we're going to we're going to come back to that, Reverend Jacquelyn. We want to take one more quick break and say thank you to our sponsors.
Thank you.
And then we're about running out of time, folks, but don't go anywhere. We're going to be back in one more minute with our final conclusions and our wrap-ups and our final thoughts of the day. So stay with us. We'll be right back.
Thank you, Center for Spiritual Living Denver, for your continued support. Thank you, Center for Spiritual Living Midtown Atlanta, for your monthly contribution. Thank you, Center for Spiritual Living North Jersey, for your monthly contribution. And please help us welcome Om Center for Spiritual Living in La Mesa, California. Thank you for your monthly donation. Thank you, Center for Spiritual Living Seattle, for your most generous donation. And a special thanks to Hefferlin Foundation for your generous technology grant. And Suze Ajit, thank you for your very generous donation. And a super special thank you to Dr. Tracy Brown, RSCP. Thanks for being a super donor. And a big shout out to all our committed donors.
And we're back with more of New Thought today here on the New Thought Media Network. We've been having a great conversation with our special guest, Dr. Reverend D. Jacquelyn Edwards. And I just want to kind of say, before we go to our final thoughts, this has been great because it is casting a vision of how New Thought is relevant moving into the coming age, into what's next. And it's no question we've all been called here. I think it's just amazing. And I'm so excited that for the first time in my experience of New Thought, 20 years or so now, I really see a vision that we talk about, a world that works for everyone, that we're figuring that out. And we're not quite there yet, but we're holding that vision and getting there. D. Jacquelyn, I can see you want to jump in on that one.
I have there probably two things I want to make sure that I throw in there. One is I want to give a shout out to my colleagues, my sisters on the volunteer team. We are led by Reverend Carol Hunt, who is the senior minister at Unity of Harlem. Reverend Benicia Wills Lufroy, who is a CSL minister, and she is in the CSL Southern Nevada community. And we have Annette Purcell, who is a member of Unity Harlem, and Reverend Joyce Anderson, who is the senior minister of the UFBL community in New York. And we have Nicole Woods, who belongs to the Unity community there in Kansas City, who's doing a lot of our tech work. She's putting together our charts as people volunteer. She's filling in the tables with their volunteer assignments. And finally, Nisa and I am having a moment right now. I cannot remember Nisa's last name. She is very integral to the sign up to volunteer piece in terms of, again, making sure that the assignments are clearly noted and that people know what it is that they're up to. So shout out to the volunteer team. The other thing, which is the thing that, I'm just going to say it. When we talk about liberation theology, when we talk about social justice, we have to bring the conversation of racism into the room. Because for all of the isms, when you look at all of the isms, no matter what, if it's sexism, if it's homophobia, if it's ageism, when you look at all of them, when you add Black and brown into it, you get a more intensified form of it. And from a philosophical standpoint, I invite us to consider that perhaps as we address that, and just as a sidebar, it might be why it is the area where there's so much pushback, where there's just, no. We can't talk about critical race theory. No. But I invite us to consider, if just as we say, when you address one area of your life, all areas improve, that as we address racism, all the rest of it lifts up. What is that? The rising tide lifts all boats.
Yes.
So I just really wanted to throw those two things out there. Shout out to my peeps, the team, and the criticality of us, as sensitive as it is, as difficult as it is, addressing race issues as a core to our going forward.
Yeah.
Well, it's again, the best teacher is nature itself, and there's nothing more natural in nature than the body. And if the body gets something that ails it, the first thing we got to get it out of there. And we got to get it out quick, because if we don't, it's going to spread and it's going to get worse. And what would have taken a small amount of time or effort in the beginning to extract it would now take an act of Congress, if you will, to get it out. And so the more we can begin to look at these things that are ailing us, that are ailing society, whether it's at a family level or community level or global level, the more we can begin to look at these things, identify them, and then begin to figure out remedies and treatments and whatever to relieve the body, i.e. the human body, as in the globe, the better we're going to be, the better the planet is going to be. I mean, right now we see all manner of things with floods and fires and all that. So we need to do that right now.
And my final comment, and it ties into the racial justice piece, is that, and I debate whether I want to say this in mixed company or not, but I think it's time. Black people on the globe have had to endure and yet thrive through such egregious, horrific conditions and circumstances that we are actually the natural leaders to get us out of this mess.
Yeah.
That there is an experiential, and remember, my background is human resources, where we say you got to have 5 years experience, that there is such an experiential history that it is amazing when we look at the Octavia Spencers, the actors and the musicians and the writers and the richness of folk, again, planetary, that have thrived, who are doing really, really well in spite of.
Yes.
And there's some skill sets in that now get to be applied to everybody.
Yeah.
And on that note, I am complete.
And my closing word would be, if you take coal and put it under enough pressure, it becomes a diamond.
Amen.
And that's where we are right now. The coal has been pressured to be a diamond, and the wealth of it is exponential.
Thank you, Z. Thank you, D. Jacquelyn Edward, for being with us. I'm reminded of of a great Cajun song adapted by the Grateful Dead called "The Women Are Smarter," and you sparked that for me in what you were sharing there. And if we know that the women are smarter, and if we know that people of color have demonstrated so much more success because of what has had to become overcome, then I think the future is in good hands if we're following powerful and boisterous Black women.
Yeah.
Women of power, women of color, women that are leading the way. And when I look at this retreat and I look at who's putting it together, and I look at the people in the background that aren't taking the fame, but are taking the reins to make this happen, it predominantly is a group of women of color. So kudos, congratulations. I say it every week. I'm very happy with where life is calling me. And if not for a much prior agreement, I would be with you all next week. And we're going to be there, folks. New Thought Media Network, come be with us. There is still time. There is still registration available. If you can't make it physically and in person, you can still register virtually.
Yes.
Head on over to their website, padntg.org, and learn more about this most powerful program. We keep saying it. You had an event last year. This is not the end of this organization and this group. This is a big old family reunion and coming out party. We invite you to be a part of it because I get a feeling it'll be back again and again and again. We're going to keep doing this year after year in the coming years.
Amen.
Thank you, Robert, so very, very much for the work you do. Thank you. And I'm glad we had our little break there because I got to say, oh, I can sign up and be a contributor. So thank you for this work that you do. Thank you. And thank you, Brother Elzia Sekou. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, folks, we've run a little overtime, but that's okay. It's our network. We're allowed to do what we want to do. We're going to get out of here for now. Let you get into the rest of your week. We'll see you again next week. Until then, we wish you peace and richest blessings.